Hello and welcome if you are new to the channel. My name is Shanae Morris and I create mindful fine art. Or at least that is what I have discovered I would specifically like to create over the creation of this collection behind me. This is my second collection to date. I kept thinking it was the first. I forgot that I did do a collection of 10 acrylic pour paintings that I did and then edited, and if you are curious about that, please check them out at ShanaeMorrisArt.com. Both this collection behind me and that collection are listed there. But this was a much more serious collection to my mind after I had a consultation with another artist in deciding on how to move forward and what I should be doing. And part of that was pushing for more cohesiveness. And ultimately, I have been working towards these goals in my mind. My real goal is to connect the organic, the chaos, everything over on this end of the spectrum with the order and the geometric. I've been studying sacred geometry, which is essentially looking at things at the macro and the micro and how they're similar. And it really is trying to break nature down into categorical math, which the fun part is that it really ultimately brings you something beautiful that looks really cool, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. But I like the two. It's my exploration really of the human experience and the human mind as perceived by me. And I think that's what all artists are usually trying to do, is find some sort of mode of communication and expression saying, I think and see and feel this thing. And you? So I want to break this down because this is a collection that has been 2 years in the making. I finished it this past year, so it is officially my collection of 2024, and it has been a genuine journey. Thus, I have named the collection Evolution because it took place during a time that I moved houses. So moving between states, quite the endeavor, which meant I also had to move my studio into a new place. A lot of shuffling parts, trying to find things, losing things, finding them, back and forth all over the place for a little while. And on top of all of that, juggling having a family, which is hard in any profession. But I feel like in particular, artists are quite well known for being loners and having their families usually pretty frustrated with the amount of time they want to give their work. So I am happy to see this collection at a completion. Moving forward, I would like to see enhanced speed in the completion of such a collection. But first we got to justify the why and the how and all of that, right? So I'm going to bring you a little closer, and I would just like to break down each of these, let you take a closer look, and that is going to wrap up my year of 2024. I'm very excited about the year 2025, but we're going to wait until we get there to talk about it. Let's go take a look at these. This is the first one that I completed, and so it is the first one that I would like to talk about. This one ended up being titled Down the Rabbit Hole, obviously because there are the rabbits. A particularly fun thing that I like about this one is that it was a big foray for me into this line work that I discovered. It was also learning how to obscure the shapes and blend them. This was my first major collection in oils. And my personal favorite part about this piece is this rabbit, because he's a little bit funky and odd, and I happen to know at least 2 people that really hate that he is there. And well, that tickles me just for that fact in and of itself. I don't care. I love this one. This might be my favorite in the collection. Close to it is this one. Now, this was not completed next necessarily, but this is one called So Below, and I was really intimidated in working on it because after nailing down the initial shapes and coming back to add in the line work and the details and going over all of it, everybody loved its initial iteration. So every time I took a brush to this one, I was scared that I was going to ruin it. Which brings me over do this one. Now, I'm not going to pause the video or pretend that I remember his name right now. Oh, it's Autumn. There we go. This is why I have one child. I can remember one name. But this is Autumn, and this is the one in the previous video. If you saw me ruin, quote unquote, my painting, this is what happened. And luckily what happened after that one is I got out some frustrations, because after you work in a collection for a while and in the same color palette, same shapes, and you're trying to figure out all the different ways that you can play around with them, you kind of start wanting to pull your hair out. So I took some of the dark paint to it that I have been using in my palette and drew lines all over it. I thought I was going to do something crazy with it. Turns out at the very end, after I got all the frustration out, I smoothed it all out and made it a glaze over top of the whole painting, and then went back in, and that is what led to Prayer in Bloom, which I quite adore. This is another one. I decided to glaze the both of these. Their alternative names would have been Nighttime and Daytime. For me, these two go together. And that is because these were the two where I first started playing around with glazes. I got a tip from a couple of other oil painters who saw my geometric work and were saying that the depth that I could create potentially with glazes would be phenomenal. So this really was an exploration into that, and this is the collection that truly gave me my skills that I currently have in oil painting. As a self-taught painter, sometimes you just got to go for it, and I hate doing studies, so sometimes we just go big. Now here is, see, I don't know which one of these is my favorite. Love this one, super, super love it, but also this is the Seed, and I truly love the imperfections that I left in this one. The brush strokes that you can still see, and the complexity. This was the final one I was working on because it was the most complex puzzle. And what happens with all of this collection, let's step back here for a minute. These were all built upon the same general shape. Okay, so I'm working with the Seed of Life and the Flower of Life, and that pattern repeated just over and over and over again, okay? And by working with that pattern, I wanted to understand its potentials, its limitations, at what scale and what ratio, where to place it on the canvas, playing around with composition. What would that do to those shapes? What can you create of it? So all of these started off in a way very similar. And they all started off just with geometric forms. And then as layers of paint were applied, I locked in the desired forms that I found. So I didn't necessarily fill in each and every little line. Instead, I kind of edited and dictated to them as they really bloomed and became who they wanted to be. And I locked in those shapes to create varying effects. This was really the painting that I would set to the side. It was my favorite puzzle, and it's how sometimes I convinced myself to work on the other paintings as I would take a break and work on that one. We're gonna wait on that top one and talk about this guy. This was actually the second completed in the collection. And in particular, I love the evolution of this one. Its original title was Evolution, and it got changed to Autumn Woods. I waffle back and forth with changing it back, but this is one that I thought was done. And so it was both done as the second one and as one of the final ones, because at the very end, it just wasn't quite yet what I wanted. There wasn't enough complexity to its form. It felt unfinished. And I couldn't tell if I wanted to bring lines into it similar to what I had going on here in So Below, and in particular the lines that I really came to adore in Down the Rabbit Hole. So for this one though, and I didn't want to go back through and do that, I was also trying to find a way to bring this to a timely close. You can spend forever on a collection and on paintings, I guarantee it, I promise you, because I felt like I did. To the point where, if you saw some previous videos, I have been crying to get blue into my life. So sneak peek into 2025, there will be blue. It is coming. For this one, he got a couple of rounds of glaze,
and then repainting in some shapes, because at the very end what I really wanted was, see if I can point to this, these flowers. I wanted these petals to stand out, and they didn't before. They were kind of lost in the mess of all of it, and I couldn't decide if I wanted one shape to stand out over another, and in the end I'm really happy with how that turned out. And this is the final one in the collection of 7. Now this one's kind of a hard one for me, because I think I posted this one the most to social media. And I worked on it often. This was one of the very first ones to be drawn out. The moths were a very last addition, but I always wanted them in there. I didn't know if they were going to be moths or butterflies, but I had this idea of a vortex and a swirl. And I can't lie and say that I'm incredibly happy about it, because I don't know, this painting exists in limbo for me. At one point I was calling it the sacrifice of my collection, and I don't even know if that's fair to it, because there are moments in this painting that I like, and of all of them, this is where so much learning occurred. And so for that, I have to be kind and give grace to this painting. But it also it holds a deep sadness for me, because I had such goals and such lofty ambitions, and despite what I have told other painters with advice in regards to not biting off too much, I usually liken it to deciding that all of a sudden you've decided you want to run a race and you want to jump hurdles. But instead of working up towards that or using lower hurdles, you decide to just go ahead and put a bunch of hurdles on the track as tall as they'll go, and you just keep running headlong into them. You can do it that way, to be fair. You're allowed to do it that way. But I don't recommend it, because I feel like there is an easier way to work up to that. However, you have to convince yourself.
For me, it's completely fair to say that I do overcomplicate things sometimes. I couldn't just study the color wheel. Not how my brain works. I had to put the color wheel in the context of geometry. Something else that I thought I wouldn't study, because I hated geometry when I was in school. Turns out, if you put it in the context of painting and art, I'm obsessed with it. I'm actually starting to understand some more of it better. So this really was a journey of learning the skills. I worked on myself a lot this year, coming to more of a mindful practice in my own personal life, something that my mental health desperately needed. When therapy didn't work for me, guys, I recommend it as your first stop in your mental health journey, because it works wonders for some people. But unfortunately, I was not able to get all of that figured out, so I had to do some self-work and reach out to some personal friends. And just because I have to be this. I don't know any other way to explain that, and I don't mean to sound like a crazy person, or maybe I do. I just mean to be honest. I paint because I have to paint. I don't know any other way to exist. I feel unstable when I'm not putting a brush to canvas. And so I wanted to merge my needs, that was to create, to paint, to exist in that form, and to not lose sight of the gift and joy that it is to have a family, and to cultivate that family, and to put the work into your loved ones that they deserve, your presence that they deserve. So going forward, what I gave to this collection and what I would love to continue to give is mindfulness, is reflection, self-reflection, self-knowing, to give you a space to contemplate something, but not to force you to think anything. I want you to look at this and think and go inside of yourself and let it be a mirror reflecting back at you. whatever it is that you need to glean. So, wrapping all of this up, I hope to see you in the new year. I hope you check these out closer. Again, if you would like to look at them closer, I am on TikTok as well as Instagram, mainly Instagram if you're looking for art at Shanae Morris, and ShanaeMorris.com, ShanaeMorrisArt.com if you would like to find my artwork in a more professional presentation. All the best, my lovelies. Until next time. Bye.